Hey everyone, Focus here. About every 6 months we get this video in the Birds of Prey user group and on BGG whether we can provide some kind of tutorial video on how to play the game, and I haven't found anything so far, and the answer was always like, you know, just read the text, read the rule books, it should be fine. I just tried to make the first video, maybe it will help someone. Two caveats to that. One, this is my first YouTube tutorial, so there might be a couple of rough edges around it. Second one is I'm not the best tactical Birds of Prey player, so you might follow it for the sequence of play and just the general mechanics of the game, but you know, don't look at this video for tactics or how to play well, so it's not that. With that said, have fun and, you know, hope you enjoy the game. Okay, so let's talk about scenario setup, or specifically let's look at the scenario card, see what's going on. And I simplified the scenario that I just said, you know, I'm just interested in this guy here. Oops, my bad. I'm just interested here in Baker 3. The other two planes I'll take out of the simulation just to make it a bit easier right now. So we'll see we have some kind of set weight here, and we have more information here, so no G-suit, you know, what color our airplane is, how many fuel points, you know, G training. This will all play into the game later on. So this is our setup information, and this is important. It shows us where to put it. Whoops, correction, where to put it is actually here on the map, so in hex 101. And we also have all these information like altitude, speed, where our nose and canopy is, you know, what kind of starting weapons we have, and so on. And the best thing is right now, before we start our scenario, we go to the aircraft control chart and actually put everything in we have right now. Okay. So if I switch back here, nope. Okay. So now I switch back to the aircraft control chart, and we can already enter stuff. So we were at hex 0101. Our altitude was, I think, 110. And we had a speed of 420. 420. Nope. 420. Okay. Also, our weight was 9,000. 9,000. And if we look onto our aircraft data chart, we can see on the left here this column, you know, weight, which results in a wing loading. Now 9,000 falls between 8,300 and 9,400, and the rule in Birds of Prey is if you have two values, always pick the larger one, you know, yeah, pick the larger one if you have a value that falls in between. So in this case we get wing loading of 40 and a safe load of 7, and this is something we can already fill in here. So we have a wing loading of 40, 40, oops, 40, and a safe load of 7. Okay. And then we can just already flip back to the performance normal, and we can enter these values here because these are things that will not change during the game. So we'll take our brush and mark up 40 up here. So we know wing loading won't change for us here. So wing loading would change if during the fight the weight of the aircraft would change, and this could happen, for example, if you fire missiles. Missiles are fairly heavy, or if you play with the optional rules with fuel and you burn through a lot of fuel and enter in a different wing load. But in our standard scenarios, especially now without missiles, wing loading won't change. Right. So the other thing what we find from the aircraft data card here is our max lift value, which is down here, is 14. Which we can also enter in the performance normal. It's down here. 40. And this is something else that won't change during the game. Alright, back here. So this is almost done for setup. The other thing we have to do is fill in our position of the nose up here, and we get that straight from the scenario setup. So we have nose 60 minus 30, and what we do is we find the 60 ring, which is the inner ring. We find the 60 direction, which is this guy here, and then we find the 30 ring. So this would be the 0, 0 ring, this is the 30 ring, this is the 60 ring. So in here, and we mark the nose here like that. Whoa, let me try that again. We mark it like, barely better. Now because the nose is pointing downwards, I'm just making the mark here, like you can see here. If we would be in the positive plus 30 degree ring, I would also draw a circle around it. Next we have the canopy at 330 minus 30, and again 330 minus 30, and again because it's facing downwards or below the horizon line, it does not have the ring around it. Okay, and finally we have the right wing at 30 plus 60, 30 plus 60 here, and this time because the right wing is pointing upwards, we have the plus 60, we draw the circle. And although this might look a bit squished and funny, you can validate it by just making sure every position from each other is 3 hexes away. 3 hexes is 90 degrees, and it has to be 90 degrees away. So if we look at the nose, we see it's 1, 2, 3 hexes away from the canopy, and we can just count straight across because both are below the horizon. Now the canopy, if we calculate the distance between canopy and right wing, we have to go over the horizon to just simulate, you know, it has to go around. So in here we have 1, 2, 3, so this is correct. The canopy is 90 degrees away from the right wing. And finally the right wing is also, you know, 1, 2, 3 hexes away from the nose. So this is a valid setup. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to calculate our initial bearing to the bomber here on the FAT. I just cheated here a bit. And what we want to do is actually go here onto our map, and then we calculate the distance, roughly the bearing and the distance of the bomber to our own position. And when we do that, we notice that this is 14 hexes and our altitude difference is 10. So we at altitude 110, the bomber is at altitude 100. Now if we go on to the visual sighting aid, what we have to do again is on range 14, so axis range 14, we want to find the value in the column that is at least as high, if not bigger, and we find this in second column. So 23, certainly greater than 10. We would not be able to use the 0 column because, you know, our altitude difference of 10 is greater than 7. So we know the bearing to the bomber is somewhere in the 30 degree band, and we also know it's in the lower 30 degrees because our altitude is higher. Then if you look at the bomber, the bearing is very close to the hex column, and in the 30 range band here we don't have that many options. So if we want to put it along the spine, hex spine, which would be, let me just draw it here, we can see that, you know, the hex spine goes along here, whereas the hex column goes along here. So we see the bomber is very close to the hex column, not necessarily the hex spine. So we know now that the bomber, and I'll note it as Baker 3, B3 for Baker 3, is in this column here. And we can also say B3. We know from the scenario setup that we have a tally, so it's visible. And now we want to calculate the aspect of it. And the aspect is 2 values. One is the angle of nose, and the second one is the angle to the canopy of the target. And the angle of nose and angle of canopy is just the distance in hexes from, you know, the nose and respectively the canopy. So in this case, our angle to the nose would be 1. So we calculate it here, 1. And to the canopy is 1, 2, 3, 4. So our aspect is 1.4. So this is our AON here, and this is our AOC here. Okay. Okay, and this is the bearing to the bomber. So incidentally, you can easily calculate the other bearing, or the bearing from the bomber to us, just by inverting the whole thing. So from the bomber, we would pretty much put our bearing up here in the plus 30 degree, and then on the opposite side of the compass. So our target, so M for MiG, would be up here. We would be also in the plus 30 degree band up here. And then because the bomber's nose and canopy are on different cells, you would have to recalculate a different aspect, but this is fairly quick to do. Okay, so now I move the bomber from here to here 6 hexes. It stays at the same altitude, and again we have to recalculate the bearing now. Now this is pretty close to the hex spine, so this makes it easy for us, and it should be at distance 17, and again altitude 110, so 10 difference. And if you go back to the visual 8, you see here this distance 10, and again we're in the 30 degree field, or 30 degree band. But however, because we're now very close to the hex spine here, we can actually place it down into the hex spine here, which means the bomber moved right into our in front of our nose, which is not bad. So let's remove that here. Okay. All right. So new bearings. Then the aspect ratio, or the aspect to the target, changes as well. And again, AON, AOC, angle to nose, angle to canopy. And right now it's angle to nose is 0, angle to canopy is 1, 2, 3. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Yep. So now we have an aspect of 3. That's pretty good. So if we then go back to the sequence of play, we're still in the flight phase. Now what we are doing is we plot and move our plane, and this is pretty much where the majority of your time playing is spent. Okay, so let's think about it a bit, what we want to do this turn. Our target is pretty much right in front of our nose, which we can see here on the FAT, because here that's unfortunate color right now, because both the nose and the bearing to the target are in the same hex here. Maybe something blue. Okay. Here. Okay. So what we want to do is, we're still higher than our target. We're at 110, whereas our target is at 100. So what we want to do is actually lose a bit of altitude. Then we want to rotate down from this weird, we are inverted and heading down. So we want to move our canopy somewhere here, that we're getting a bit more straight and level. And once we've done that, our wing should be somewhere here. So this guy moves over here, which will allow us to pull out of this dive and go straight and level. And hopefully we can use the play here in the 3D movement diagram to actually shed exactly 10 height or 10 altitude steps, which would bring us onto the same level as the bomber and make a lot of things way easier. Okay, so what I did is, and I have to admit I played through it once or twice just to get a rough idea, or to have some kind of script going on. So what we want to do is pretty much spend about half of our turn just continue straight down on our 30 degree descent while rolling into a nice position, and then we spend the second half of our turn pulling out. Now before we can do anything, we're still missing a couple of values down here. So we still need to calculate KES, Mach number, our aero load limit, and so on. And to do that, we go into our performance normal. And the first thing we're going to do is calculate our KES, our not equivalent airspeed, and we use these 2D normals on the left hand side. And it's fairly easy. You have two values, one to calculate a third, so what you do is pretty much line them up correctly. So our altitude is 110, we know that, and we know our speed is 420, it's up here. So what we want to do is we take this and then we draw through 110, remove that, and then we can see here our speed is about 290. So KES is 290, and we can enter that here. So 290. And then down here we do the same thing. So we're at 110. This time we have to enter KES, so we go through the 290, and we're roughly here. So we're about Mach 0.7. 0.7, which puts us in the slow range here. So this will be later important for calculating, you know, drag and all that stuff. So on the performance normal here, what you want to do next is calculate your Q mark, which will be used in a lot of other calculations. So what we have to, or what we have here are, you know, three values. Again, we want to calculate the fourth one. We have the wing load, which we have here. We have entered that before. Our maximum lift comes from the aircraft data chart and is unchanging. We just calculated the KES to be 390, so somewhere here. And what we get out of it is our aerodynamic load limit here. And this describes or tells us how fast we can pull this turn, or how much we can pull this turn. So we start just by connecting everything up. So that's what did we say? We have KES of 290. Whoops. So 290 is actually down here. My mistake. So down here. So 290, and then we connect it to the 4. I have to be careful. If I drag it the wrong way, it will just curve the line, and this is not what we want. So 290 to 40, which gives us this very important intersection here, which we will label the Q mark, and this is unchanging and will be used throughout the turn. And then finally we connect our maximum lift, the 14 here, through the Q mark, and we go all the way here. So we find an aerodynamic load limit here of about 10, which we can enter here. Now that means we can pull up to 10 Gs this turn. However, our safe load is still 7. So if we pull more than 7, we risk, you know, damaging the airframe, and we have to roll on different tables and whatnot. So we should limit ourselves to 7 Gs. Okay, so now we're in the plotting segment, and let's just stick to the plan from before. So we want to spend about half the turn, you know, going down on this 30-degree descent, and then spend half the turn pulling gently up. A turn in Birds of Prey has 10 ticks. And we select a load, or we select a flight type for, you know, segments. So the first segment in our case would be 5 ticks long. I can mark it up here. So the first one should be 5 ticks long, and the second one should be also 5 ticks long. Now there are two types of segments in Birds of Prey. One is a straight segment where we don't do any pulls, and we usually enter a load of 1. And that means it doesn't matter whether you're flying straight up, flying straight down, as long as you're not turning, you're flying a straight segment. You can also roll in it, so what we'll do. The second one is a turning segment where we select a turning load, and turning load is actually what moves the nose across the fan. So in Birds of Prey, what you want to do is actually roll your wings so that your lift mark points roughly at your target, and then you just start pulling. So having a straight segment where you turn and then a turning segment within a turn is fairly common in Birds of Prey. Okay. So we said we wanted to fly half the turn, so 5 ticks in the first segment in a straight segment, and we'll just begin to enter, say here, okay, we'll fly 1 load because we're flying straight, and this for 5 turns. And usually I just mark it up something like that, so where I know that, you know, it saves a bit of writing. Now what we want to do up here is, again, on this table, we want to find how fast we're going, how many FPs we're going. We now take our speed, not our KES, which was 420, and again find the next equal or highest column or row, which is 440 here. And then we just count up how many ticks we spend, and we end up in the 5 column. And we can say we spend already 5 ticks in that direction. Now back on your aircraft control chart, what you then do is, I use the middle fat for plotting. I write in 5 in this field. Actually, let's use the nice font so you can actually read it. 5 here. And again, because we're pointing in the -30 ring, so 30 degrees downwards, it doesn't get a ring. But this tells us, you know, 5 FP down there. All right, so this was fairly easy. This is your first segment, so nothing happens. Now in the second segment, what we want to do, oh no, before we're done, what we also wanted to do is move the canopy across. And to do that, we have to generate rolling points. Now back on your aircraft data chart, you have the middle column here, this guy. And it tells you for which lift you generate how many rolling points. Right now we don't have any lift, we don't know anything about lift, but we know about the load. So we don't know anything about the lift right now, but we know about the load we chose. Namely, we chose a load of 1 for the first 5 segments. So if we go back here into our performance normal, what we want to do is connect on the left scale on the load here the 1 for chosen load of 1 with a Q mark, and go somewhere on the right hand side to calculate lift. And then you can see here lift used. And this falls somewhere between 1 and 2, and we can say, well, maybe it's closer to 1, so we use the 1 value. Okay. Now back on the aircraft data chart, you can see for a lift of 1 here, this is what we calculated. We get different roll rates. We have the standard roll rate, the safe roll rate, and the boosted roll rate. Now they are a bit of there are a couple of differences, but it tells you how many points or how many hexes on the FAT you can roll for each flight point, for each FP. So remember, in our first segment we had 5 FPs. If we choose the safe roll rate, we could pretty much rotate 25 hex cells, which is way more than we need. So let's use the safe roll rate. We generate 5 rolling points, and this should help us to move our canopy and wing across the FAT. So our canopy starts here in the 330 -30, and we want to move it somewhere here. Okay. Now the question is, on which path does it move? Because the wing will also move somewhere down here. And the answer is, the distance has to be always 3 hex cells from the nose, and this forms like a circle on which both nose and right wing move, and we can mark those up. So the wing was in the nose was in here, so we can mark up all cells now on the bottom side, distance 3, and we'll see where it moves. So 1, 2, 3, so this would be a valid position. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then we do the same thing for the top half, but now we have to count out to the horizon and back. So 1, 2, 3. This would be a valid position. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3 is a valid position. Let me just see. No, that would be 1, 2. That's not a valid position. This would be 1, 2. This is also not a valid position. Let me just undo that because that's just wrong. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Counting to 3 can be hard. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and you can see this kind of sort of L football shape. This is actually, you can think of it as a projection of a circle onto a sphere. Look at it from above. But this is the path on which both the canopy and the nose will move. So let's get that out to make it a bit clear. And let's say we want to roll to the right. And we can see the canopy starts here, and we want to move 1, 2, 3. We want the canopy to move to here, and it will be in the plus. I'll clean it up in a second, it will look better. And at the same time, the right wing moves from here down to here, 1, 2, 3. So we just need in the end 3 roll points, and we generate 25, so it's all good, we have plenty. So before I do anything else, let me just clean a lot of that stuff up, so we don't need that. And by the way, when you play on the physical copy, yours will look like that in a bit as well. But that's why you have erasable markers, so no problem. Okay, so we will end up with a canopy here, we said. So this moved there, and the wing moved here. Okay, cool. So generally, what happens when you're rolling is, and also with turning, you have one fixed point of your 3 markers. And when you're rolling, the nose stays fixed. So this guy here doesn't move, which makes sense. Oh, let me just... So this guy here doesn't move, which makes sense because, you know, if you're rolling, just the canopy and the wings move. Now, on the other hand, if you're turning, like in the next segment, the right wing will stay fixed, this guy here, while both the canopy and the nose will move. Okay, now onto the second segment. This will be a turning segment. And the question is, how much do we want to pull? So for each turning segment, we have to decide how many Gs, how many turn Gs we want to generate by selecting a load. And this can be not easy to estimate or to guess. So if we look back at the FAT, what we want to do is we're in this 30-degree dive, and all we want to do right now is just move the nose 30 degrees, you know, into the horizontal. So we're not pointing straight down anymore. If you look at the turning normal, where we worked all the time, you can see that these marks here. So for turning, we need to generate turning points, and you know, in most cases 6 turning points equal 30 degrees. So we know we want to generate 6 turning points. We also know our speed, which was 420 here, and we know our segment duration, namely 5 ticks here. And again, we can just connect those two to get our turn G answer. However, when we want to use it, we have to calculate it or calculate it again by selecting the turn Gs first. So calculating forward to calculate what kind of turn Gs you might want gives you a rough estimate of what you have to select in the actual calculation step. But let's do that like that. So we just connect those two. And again, you have an intersection with a diagonal here. And then you select a 420 here, connect it, and you get an answer of about 3.5, a little bit more. So in this case, it would be more prudent or safe to select a load of 4. However, there's one slight problem here. See, whenever your nose mark crosses one of these fat lines on the fat, and I'll just mark it up here, like these guys here, or these, okay? Whenever your nose crosses one of those lines, upwards, you actually have to create one load more, or your turn G gets reduced by one. Whereas if you cross them downwards, you pretty much get one turn G for free. But for us, that means that while we need to generate 4G, we have to select a load of 5. We still have a load of 4 turn Gs, but we still have a turn G of 4, but we have to select 5. So let's do that first. Let me just delete those. So we set 420, we want 4. And then if we connect those two, we see it's somewhere between 6 and 7, so we generate 7 turn points. And we just need 6, so we can take 1 actually as an overflow. However, in the load table, we don't enter 4, we enter 5, as discussed, because, you know, we're crossing it upwards. So the next thing is how many FPs, how many flight points do we generate? And this time we start here, we don't start from the beginning. We are now at tick 10, and we go all the way here. So we create 11 flight points, but we have to subtract the 5 from before. So in the end, we create 6 flight points. All right, if we go back, what's happening is that we actually pull our nose from here to here. And if you have a multi-segment turning or how should I say it, multi-tick turning segment, you should find the center of all the cells you crossed, and then that's where you mark your FP. And in our case, it's right on the border between 0.60 and 0.45, where we have to enter 6. So our 6 flight points will be actually here right on the border of these two. Okay, so this is our plotting segment. Last thing we can do is pretty much calculate our average load, and that will be, you know, 25. Here 5 times 5, 25, plus 5 times 1, 5. So we have an average load of, you know, or sum of 30 divided by 10, so average load of 3.0. Cool. Okay, movement. So what I usually do is I work left to right. So this is my initial state, then I do plotting here, and then I move here for my next turn information. But, you know, you can also work on just one fat. Okay, movement first. And the way movement works is that we actually calculate 3D movement here first. And it's fairly simple. So you follow, well, it's not simple, but, you know, straightforward. You follow a path along these colored wedges. So for example, if you're in the -30 segment like we are here, you have to be within this segment, and you go as many hexes as you have FP generated. So in our case, we generated 5 FP here, so we have to go 5 hexes down here. And then if you go up or down, or at first it will create here some kind of delta altitude value, but it will also create some kind of horizontal flight path or horizontal FP, which you will use then here in the 2D movement aid to actually move across the board. So it's a 2-step process. All right. So in our case, we generated 5 FPs here. And remember, we still, at this point, we just want to get rid of altitude right now. So what we want to do is, let me just get my pen here. Okay. So we know it's in the -30 ring, which is this golden wedge shape here, and we have to stay in there. So what we want to do is go 5 FPs along. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example. And you can see we have an altitude difference of -6, so I mark it here. And you have 2 columns, you know, one for negative, one for positive. And you can see, although we had 6 or 5 FP, we only get 4 horizontal points. On the horizontal on the 2D movement 8, what you could do, for example, is, so again, the 5 flight path is in the 0.60 wedge, so that means you have to have your movement within this white colored wedge here, so between 0.75 and 0.45. So what you could do is, for example, go right, go down, and then go down and go down again. So this didn't look nice. Let's try it. Right, down, down, down. Now this is a valid hex, valid point down here, because it's both on this wedge and this wedge. And what you want to do is pretty much not get too far away and stay roughly in the correct. I'm not sure how to put it, but at this point, you play around with. It's called play. It's the bit of wiggle room you have in the movement, and you just want to make sure that you don't overshoot, undershoot, stay close to your target, but don't get into a bad situation. So at this point, what you do is a lot of eyeballing and trying to move correctly. So you would move about here right now. Now the second part of the turn, or the second segment. So let's get rid of all of this stuff for now. Get rid of that and this. Okay. So in the second case, the 6 FP are on the wedge here, and that means in our case our movement has to be between here, right? So what you want to do is we still want to get rid of 4, and we just follow these wedges here. So we go 1, and we have to move 6 FP. So we go, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we end up here. We get rid of another 4 FP, and we create 6 horizontal movement points. And in this case, what you could do, for example, it's still in the 60 and 45. So you go within this wedge here. So you go right, 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 right. So right, down, right, down, right, down. For example, here. And you should end up in hex 0509 if I did it right. Okay. And your altitude reduced to 100. Okay, so let's talk about performance. This is the next step we have to do, and it's pretty much all about filling out this field down here. Okay, so stores and form drag. If we go back to the aircraft data chart, you can find form drag down up here. And we know we're in the slow region, so we have a value of 14. So let's enter that. And this should also not necessarily change during the game unless you shoot missiles and whatnot. And back to the performance normal. So right now here in the form, this is the inner scale on the left hand side here. Again, what we do is connect the 14 here through the Q mark, and we get a value here of about, a little less than 30. So we can enter 30 here, so it should be negative 30. Then the greatest load we used was 5, remember, to generate 4G turn. We had 5 here. And back to the ADC, we know, oh, that is not correct. Back to the performance normal, and similar to what we did before, with the roll rate, we calculate how much lift we used. So we had a load of 5 connected through the queue. We find about a lift of 7. Okay, so we enter 7 here, and if we then look onto the aircraft data chart here, a lift of 7 results in a DPG, drag per G, of 6. So we enter 6 here on the ACC. So 6. And we had an average load of 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, average load of 3, which gives us a delta turn speed of negative 18. Or pretty much 18. Sign doesn't matter here much because we know we will always shed some speed. Alright, except in the following case. We know that we got rid of 10 altitude. And if we look here, again with our speed, 440, and find the next column here, up here. Oh, no. That is not correct. Find the next entry here that has equal or higher value, which would be 11. And this points up to 50. So for up to 11 altitude steps, we get 50 speed. And we know because we went downhill, so it was a descent of 10 altitude steps, we know this must be positive. If you climb, you reduce your speed. If you descend, you increase your speed. So we have plus 50. All right. And usually what happens is that the rulebook said you change your engine first, or you select your engine speed first, but I usually wait until the end so I can see what my other losses are first, and then, you know, adjust my engine performance based on that. And based on that, we can see that we lose 30 for our turn. We lose about another 20 for no, come again. So we lose 30 for our inherent drag. We lose about 20 for because we turned, but we gain about 50 because we descended. So right now we're breaking even. And I don't want to accelerate too much right now. We might overshoot the target. So what I'm doing is we can see for our altitude, we're at 100. We have a maximum value of 6 here. So we have to choose a value between 1 and 6. We cannot choose 0 because we didn't declare idle throttle initially. But we can choose one of the lower values like 1. And now again what we do is go through wing load, maybe a different color. And now we choose an engine output down here. And I said, you know, 6 might be too high, we would speed up too much. But how about a, let's say a 1 or a 2? Let's say a 1. Okay, a 1 gives us plus 10. And let's enter that. So we say 1, dry output is 1, we get plus 10. And overall our net delta speed would be then plus 10. So 10 minus 30 plus, or minus 30 minus 18 plus 50. Okay. So our end speed would be 430. And we can also enter that here already. So 430, our wing loading was 40. And we should also mark down in which positions our nose and, you know, canopy and all that stuff ended. And it was 1, 2. So we wanted the nose here. Canopy ended up here from the rolling. And because we pulled up, we have to adjust the canopy as well to here. So it started here before the turn, or before the turning segment, and then it moved up here. And we can validate it again because it's 3 or distance of 3 hexes from both the nose and the wing. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and this looks all good. Okay, so that's about movement. And if we actually go back to the map and set it up, it should look something like that now. Okay, so before, after, we just covered about this distance here. And next thing you want to do is, you know, go back and calculate your bearings to the bomber again. So on the map you can measure this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hexes more or less along the spine. And a bit to the right of the spine, thank God. Yep. And we can actually put down, before we do that, altitude difference is 0. So to be double sure, we can go back to this diagram and we see 7 here, distance 7, up to 3 hexes would be, or 3 altitude difference would be in the same band, or same ring. So let me just get rid of, or not. Okay, so we know that we can put Baker 3 in here, and because it's in the 0 band, we can also draw our circle around it. Alright, so Baker 3, we still have a tally on it, and the aspect is 0, angle to nose, and an angle to canopy 1, 2, 3, 0 to 3. Alright. So that's about movement. This is pretty much the longest and most involved phase in this game. Okay, so let's go back to the sequence of play and just tick off what we have. So this was the flight phase. We've done our performance. We don't have any missiles in flight, so the next thing is what we have to do is we have to check for flight effects. And just for our plane, you know, the bombers except in the SSRs. And to do so, we need the back of the aircraft control card, which is this guy here, and we're pretty much interested in just crew G effects because we never exceeded our max safe load. We don't have to check for structure G effects. Okay, G onset and crew fatigue are also just optional rules, so we don't worry about that. So just crew G effects. And if you look on the back, I think of your visual sighting aid, you will find this a helpful play aid, and it just helps you fill in the back of the aircraft control card. So the greatest load, well, let's start with the crew effort, left to right. So crew effort is, we just go through all the modifiers here. So we have early G training according to the scenario rules, early G training here, and that's about it. So we can write down in the crew effort, it's a solid 8, not bad, and then we have to make a pips roll on that. So we go back to our pips column, and the way it works is that you select the correct column here, and for us we select column 8. Then you roll 2 percentage dice, so 2d10, and read a percentage roll. And again, the next value that is equal or higher will be on a certain roll, and then you find the row result, and this will be your pips result. I ran through the game before, and what I did is I rolled at that point a 74, and if we go down here, we find 72. And an 85. So 85 would be the first value that is greater, equal or greater. So we have a pips result of 5 in this case. Let me just clean that. And we can go on here and write our pips result of 5 here. Okay. So our greatest load, remember, was the 5 here, and we can enter that. Greatest load, 5. Oops, 5. And then we have to do a bit of math. So 5 times 2 is 10 minus 8. There's a base effect of 2. And then let's look at the modifiers, because there are quite a few. But again, you just go top to bottom, left to right, and see what's true and what not. So 1 or 2 AP straining here means this is the first time where I can spend APs. Let's just do that now. Let's spend 1 AP straining, just cause, to see how it looks like. So we can enter up here strain, for example, 1 AP strain, and as you fill them up, you will see that you have less and less activity points available. Okay, 1 AP strain gives us a modifier of 2 plus 2 here. Okay, we are not grayed or blacked out, we don't have a reclined seat, we don't have any G suits, and that's about it. Okay, that was fairly quick. So let's calculate everything. So we have 5, pips result of 5, minus 2, plus 2. So our end result of 5 is 5. We wouldn't have needed to strain, but you know, let's just see. We just wanted to use 1 AP, why not? So the result is 5, and that means Crew G effect, 0 greater normal, so nothing happened. We don't have any spin recovery or departure. What happens is sometimes if you get too slow and you're almost stalling, you accrue departure point, and this is pretty much where you would deal with them. But in our example, let's not worry about that. And with that, we're on to the combat phase. And what happens is we have our initial gunshots, our normal and tracking gunshots. We don't have missiles, but each aircraft in initiative order. Now, I'm not exactly sure about this solo scenario. I always play the damage gets rolled at the same time, because in this case we both will have, you know, the bomber and the MiG will have normal gunshots, and within each phase you resolve this damage at the same time. So let's do that, but because it's more fun for us, let's do the MiG first and then we'll do the bomber. Okay, combat phase. So you have the gun combat aid, and on the back of the ACC, the gun combat is somewhere down here. And gunshots are handled in a two-step process in Birds of Prey. First, you need to have the Pipper on, which represents putting your crosshair actually onto the enemy plane. And once you have a successful Pipper on here, you resolve your gunshots. Now the MiG-15 also has some special rules here because it has both one cannon and 2 machine guns. What it says that you have to roll just 1 Pipper on here, but then you roll for each weapon individually. And you can see they have slightly different values, especially for critical roll damage here and also range mods. And although you have a couple of things to fill in, you know, just follow your gun combat aid and you should be fine. There's not a lot of documentation in the game manual and the rules themselves, but I feel like these play aids are very good and actually help you get through it fairly quickly. So first thing we want to fill out is the other aspect, and we know we have an angle of nose is 0 and angle of canopy is 3, which is pretty good. So this gives us a 16. We go ahead and fill that in. So other aspect is 16. And before we go too deep into it, we should talk about the 3 different types of gunshots. So you have an initial, normal, or tracking shot, which you can do. Right. So the initial shot is you have to declare before you do your movement, and you record, you know, where you are in relation to your target, and then you resolve it later on. After all movement, you have a chance for a normal shot, and if you happen to have your nose on target before and after, see the shot parameters is AON equals 0, so you have to have your nose on the target, you can attempt a tracking shot. And tracking shot gives you better bonuses and so on. But right now, if you remember initially, if we look back, you know, our target was not on the, actually it was on the nose, and after our move was also on the nose. So we could attempt a tracking shot. I think it's a tracking shot. I calculated it initially as a normal shot, but I think it should be a tracking shot. So let's go with it. Alright, so the scenario, let's continue with it and go to the column mods. The scenario special rules tell us that the target, the B-29, is always unaware, so we get a +2 for that, which is good. So +2. What else do we have? The quality, well, our quality is 0, so we can't do anything. Now, if we talk about the relative speed here, or relative speed half, we have to think about the TCA, the target cross angle. And all of these terms are on a cheat sheet down here. So if you, at one point you forget what a TCA is, like I do, you just look at that. And this would be salts between noses. Now, according to the scenario 8, or scenario, the bombers always have their nose in 345. Yeah. And that would be up here. So this is the bomber's nose. So the distance to that would be 2. So we have a TCA of 2. What does that mean? So TCA of 2, we just look into the largest speed in FP. Largest speed, well, okay, back to the speed to FP table, and our speed was 420 or 430, so we have to look in the 440 row, and we know we have 11 FP. Okay, let me just remove that crap. So 440, we have 11 FP. Okay, and then we have to subtract half the value, so we have to round down. So it would be 11 minus 5.5, so it would be minus 5. Okay, where are we? 2, and then minus 5. Then the next one is negative relative load, and here it's the lift cross angle. That would be the distance between the canopy cells. And in our case, you know, our canopy is now straight up, whereas the bomber cell canopy is always all plus 90, so always up. So the lift cross angle is 90, is 0, sorry. Let's go back, here is 0. In that case, we have the relative load of C minus D, C is the greater. So we had an average load of 3. Yeah, I just deleted that. That wasn't good. Here, average load of 3. We can cheat and see that here. Average load of 3. The bomber always has an average load of 1. So that should be C minus D. So 3 minus 1 is 2. So minus relative load. So another minus 2. Alright. And then we look what the gun sight modifier is. And if you look at the aircraft data chart here, you can see that it has a gyro sight, which is pretty good. And a gyro gives us +2 and something else. So let's note the +2 first, the +2. Okay. And then if we continue reading, if TCA is greater than 3, which it is not, we had a TCA, target cross angle of 2. Okay. If lift cross angle is 0, that's true, and TCA is smaller than 3, that is also true. Ignore the relative speed modifier. So that's pretty neat. If we go back, what I can do is now this -5 for the speed doesn't apply anymore. So column mods would be just, you know, 2, -2, +2, as a total of +2. I know I'm running out of space, but here, +2. Oops. So we have 16 + 2 is 18. So we roll on the 18 pips column. Let's do that. So we have 18 up there. Right. And what I didn't roll very well there. I just rolled a 30, which still goes up here to the 38 column, which gives a pips result of 7. 7. Oh. And then we can modify the pips result even further. Okay, how do they get modified? Target AP of guns defense. The bomber never has guns defense, never spends APs, and range past wide. So fortunately both guns have the same range. We had a range of 7, so we have a range of 1, 2, 3, 3 past wide. And so we have to subtract 3, -3. A result of 4, which is greater than 1, which means we hit, which is a good thing. So this is just the Pipper run procedure. What that means, we got our crosshair onto the enemy plane, we shot, and now we have to roll for the gunshot resolution, you know, how many hits we get and how much damage they take. Gunshot resolution. Remember the rules say here for the MiG-15 we have 1 common Pipper run, but then we make 2 different attack rolls. Now let's do for the N37 for the gun first. Right. So relative speed, we calculated that before to be 11. Now the range multiplier. And I'm not sure, so I think it's a tracking shot, but previously I calculated it as a normal shot. The other spec and the range does not change between normal and tracking shot, so that's okay. Let's go with the tracking shot first. So the range multiplier, if we look here, we are range 7, which is in the green band, barely, but still in the green, is a tracking modifier of times 1/2. So that's 0.5. And that means our speed modifier, again we round down, that would be minus 5.5, so minus 5, and then plus 100, and I rolled, so I can't find it in my notes anymore. So let's say I rolled a, let's say 63, oops, yeah, 63, and then we add the range modifier as well. So range 7 is negative 15, oops, maybe I should have chosen something higher, but oh well. So negative 15, and then we add everything up. So we have minus 5, minus 15, so it's negative 20. So Pip's die roll is 43. Okay, now the gun rating. If we look at the ADC, the gun rating is all the way on the left here. It's a 7. Okay, so gun rating 7. Bands passed wide, we said it was 3. So that gives us a pips column of 4. So we roll 43 on the 4 pips column. Let's go here. So 4 column, 43, and 55 is the first value. So I get 1 hit. Not bad. Could be better, not bad. Alright. So, and this equals or greater than 1, which is a hit. Not only is it a hit, but the bomber takes 1 damage. And additionally, we can roll on the critical hits table. And so I just noticed I didn't scan it, but what you do in the end is you use the critical value of the gun, which is the crit 8 here. So you roll on the 8 pips column and you get a result, which is the number of critical hits. So let's do that. Let's use the 8 here on the 8 column. Let's roll a, let's say 57. So we get 72, so we get 4 critical hits. Now, because we only had 1 regular hit, we can't have more critical than regular hits, okay? So 1 critical hit, and what you then do is roll 2d10 on the back side. I think it's of the gun combat 8. It actually is a list of all the things that could break and stuff happen. So one thing that could happen is actually if the fuel system, you know, the target could explode, you could take out the bomb in 1 hit, which would be pretty neat. Alright, so that was the first gun. This was just the cannon. Right, and we did 1 damage. So what we're going to do is delete all of this stuff here. Okay, we don't have to do a second Pipper on, but we have to do a second gunshot resolution. So again, relative speed 11, range multiplier. I think it's still 0.5. You know, it's a tracking shot. So that gives -5 for the speed modifier. D100, let's say it's a 72 this time. I remembered how to do that. Rolling high is important. And if you look at the speed modifier, it's -21. It's a fairly far away shot. So -21. Alright, so we subtract 26 from 72, would be 46, I think. Okay, now gun rating is a 7. Bands passed wide was 3. So 4 pips column, 46 and 4 pips. Looks similar as before. 4 and then 46, so again 1 hit. Alright, 1 hit. Cool. So the bomber now took 2 hits total, and again we roll on the pip column for the crit rating of the gun, and this time the machine gun only has a crit rating of 3. So 3 column, and let's say we roll a 73, so another crit hit. Okay. And we would enter that. Now the bomber, if you look in the scenario rules, the bomber has a max damage of 9 in here. So we just took about 2, possibly maybe 3 damage out of it, so we still have 7 damage to go. So certainly you have to shoot at it in the second turn as well. As a comparison, our MiG-15 only has a damage rating of 3. If I can find it right now. A damage rating of 3, here it is. So the bomber has to shoot, hit us way less times. Okay, speaking of which, the bomber now shoots back. Before we do, we should erase all of that, and we'll use it for the bomber as well. Now the bomber has a special other aspect table, but still we first need to calculate the bearing from the bomber to us, and that would be, if the bomber is here, it should be just in the 225. Remember we just calculate the reciprocal bearing, so this should be us, for example, or MiG or whatnot. So the bomber's aspect to us would be the bomber's noses in the 345 cell would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and from the canopy would be 3. So if I just enter it here, so it would be 4, 3 we said. Okay, this goes here. Right. Now the scenario special rules has this other aspect table, and if we're in 4, 3, we get an other aspect of 10. Let me just see. 4 from the nose, 3 from the canopy, it's 10. So what we can do is in the back here, Pipper on other aspect is 10. At the column mods, let's go through those again. We're not unaware. No quality for the bomber. Relative speed. It's the same calculation as before, so we can put in minus 5.5. And this time, or round down to minus 5. And this time, if you look in the scenario rules, they say that they always use a normal shot. Let me just highlight that. Fires a normal shot every game turn here. Track the bearing, blah blah blah. Use the other aspect table, we do that. And then here B29 gyro sight does not ignore relative speed modifier. Okay, so this time we actually leave it in. Okay, the relative load, it's still lift cross angle, the cells between noses is 0. Our relative load, or our mean load was 3, their mean load was 1, so we get a relative load of minus 2. Then the gun sight modifier is a plus 2 for the gyro. If target cross angle is greater than 3, and remember this was cells between noses, TCA, cells between noses. Now the bomber is up here, we're down here, so that's a distance of 2, TCA of 2. So that still counts as a full gyro modifier, so plus 2. which gives us a final pip column of 10, minus 5, minus 2, plus 2. So pip column of 5. Let's make a roll there. Pip column of 5. Okay, roll on the 5 pips column, and I remember when I played through that before, I rolled fairly high. I think it was a 92 or so. So 5, 94, so we get a result of 4. Okay. So pip result was 4. Oh, not what I wanted. 4. And then let's look at the pips mod. Let's just use 2 APs of gun defense, because yeah, might be a good idea to do that. So in the AD aircraft control chart, we just write in gun defense, gun def, and we use 2 AP to do so. So we have 3 action points left. But that also means minus 2 for 2 AP gun defense. Makes it harder to hit. We're weaving and whatnot. Range past wide. So we're at range 7, and it's really hard to see because I just got the black and white copy. But this is pretty much, I think this is the light green range. So we're 1, 2 actually. 2 past white, so another minus 2, and the result is 4, minus 4, 0, so we don't get hit. That's pretty good. Alright, so that was the combat phase. We shot at them, they shot at us. We can put that off. Now in full games we would now do the initiative where we, fix each other and try to figure out, who goes first and so on. In this scenario, just with one player aircraft and one controlled by the scenario special rules, we skip that completely. Now, visual sighting. This is where we have to maintain all our sightings. And the interesting thing is here that at this point, because it's fairly late, you can actually run out of AP to do so. Now there are a couple of special rules if you look through the rule book, is that, for example, if you use what we're actually missing in here is not only gun defense but also engage, which costs 2 AP. Oops. Engage, and then another engage. And if you look through the rule book, what happens is that if you engage someone with your guns, this counts pretty much as a free tally action. That means we keep track of where it is in the next turn. So this this mark down here, this will be valid for the next turn. However, you see that you only have 1 action point left, and if you play the full scenarios with 3 bombers, you cannot keep tally of all 3. For one, if you engage and pretty much padlock one target, all the visual sighting tasks for the other targets are multiplied by 2. So even trying to maintain a tally on 1 other bombers would now cost 2 action points. So at this point, you would just focus and padlock 1 bomber. And then in the next turns, if you want to attack the other ones again, you would have to visually acquire them again. So in our case, it's fairly simple. We just have 1 target, so we don't care about that right now. What we could do is just talk through it quickly to see how you would usually maintain a tally. And what you would do is, roll a d10 here, and then add the modifiers. For example, if you have gray out or black out, it gets more complicated. And then you also look into the canopy modifier, which would be this diagram here. And you can see, if you look straight up or straight ahead, you get good modifiers. If you try to look back, or actually back and below, it will get very hard. And then similar to that thing, you put in the tally range here, and now the cool thing is there's a way how to calculate it. Visual range minus auto tally. And if you look at the aircraft, at the scenario, actually, you can see that B29 has an auto tally of 45. So as long as you're not super far away, you should be able to maintain tally on the bomber fairly easily. I mean, it's a big airplane. And with that, there are only 2 more steps. So sensors, and in our case, we don't have any sensors. That would be radar or an IR system. We can just go to the administrative phase. And here, we don't have to do anything. So again, update wing load and stores drag is only interesting if you actually shoot missiles where these values would change. Otherwise, they're fairly constant throughout the game. Okay, so that is the first turn. And if you look at the table, this should be your final position. And what you can do here already is, you know, this should trail smoke, so we can actually draw some smoke here. A great artist, so smoke. And from then on, the next turn, what we would do is, so this bomber will keep moving in a straight line here. So what you would do is, again, you have 2 segments in the turn, 1 straight segment, 1 turning. In this case, our straight segment should be fairly short, and we will just use it to, you know, rotate to the left 90 degrees so that our wings are pointing up, and then we will slowly do another turn, so we should end up straight behind the bomber. But this is all for next turn. So with this, I will end this video here. And I hope you have fun. I hope you have learned something today, and I hope you will get into Birds of Prey. It's a fantastic game. It looks more complicated than it is, and this video is also fairly long for a, you know, single aircraft, 1 turn. But, you know, as soon as you get into the system, and it goes much more quicker, and especially if you don't have to explain what you're doing, you know, you can go through these turns fairly quick. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments, and yeah, have fun.